Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the brand new Rutgers Rundown podcast. I am your host, Nick Hart, alongside my co-host, Matt Mangam, where we are going to talk all things Rutgers sports every week. We're going to post on the Daily Targum website as well as the Daily Targum YouTube channel. And Matt, we have a pretty exciting weekend to talk about for our first episode. We got some Rutgers men's basketball, Rutgers women's basketball, and of course, Rutgers wrestling. Let's dive right in. Rutgers basketball, obviously a very highly anticipated season, not going the way many have hoped. 10-10 to start the year, coming off of a loss to Michigan State, not where many people expected Rutgers to be.
Yeah, we knew Michigan State was going to be a tough team. Obviously, undefeated in Big Ten, number 8 overall. But Rutgers did battle tough for most of the game, Nick. 81-74 was a close game. I think one of the, most biggest standouts was Jordan Durkak, of course, leading Rutgers with 26 points, his most, as a Scarlet Knight. And, you look at this team and it's going to be ace Billy Dylan Harper. And, of course, Dylan Harper twisted his ankle against Penn State. So he hasn't been 100%, only had 6 points in 14 minutes. This time it's not the flu, but it's, an injury kind of lingering him, holding him back. Peichel said some guys are banged up at the time of year. But, Jordan Durkak's a great player, but I just feel like, they need other guys to step up, of course. And the fact that he's such a good game, 7-11 from the floor, 8-9 from the charity stripe, and then Ace Bailey, 18 points. But besides that, really nobody. Dylan Grant had a solid 9 points, but, it feels like still time and time again, without Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, this team cannot win games. And the time where someone else does step up, like Jordan Durkak, you have Dylan Harper, who's limited. And if he was, 100%, you'd think Rutgers could have won this game.
Well, listen, if you told me that Jordan Durkak was going to have 26 points, I would have told you Rutgers won a game by 30. I wouldn't have thought they lost by 7. And that's kind of been the way that this team has played all year. It's been one guy steps up, but the rest of the team fails to show up. You saw it in the Indiana game where Rutgers lost 84-74. Ace Bailey had the game of his career. 39 points, 16 of 29 from the field, but nobody else scored in double figures. Next highest scorer was Michael Davis with 9 points.
Yeah.
And Rutgers, they've kind of just lacked an identity this season. There's games where you saw early in the season they can go out and score 85-plus points, something that we haven't really seen from a Steve Peichel coached team in a while. But then you have games when they get into the Big Ten where they're not even putting up 80 points. And for a team that doesn't really have such a great defense, that formula is not working. You have to find a way to score more points, and I think when Dylan Harper has not been healthy, whether, like you said, it's from an injury or from the flu that he was dealing with, you see a lot of the holes in this Rutgers team because without their primary ball handler, there's not a lot of, the offense just doesn't mesh well together when he's not out there.
Yeah, and a lot of that has kind of seemed to take into blame on Steve Peichel, saying that they didn't do a good. Him and the staff didn't do a good job with the transfers and with Jordan Durkak, for another one to name, or Tyson Acuff or Zach Martini, PJ Hayes, all these guys that were coming to Piscataway supposed to be really good shooters, good 3-point shooters, and not saying that they aren't. Hayes is knocking out some nice threes, and so is Martini, but they don't get enough minutes. They're not taking enough shots. People are just criticizing Rutgers' offense, the game plan, saying that they need an offensive coordinator, things like that. Because Peichel's teams, it was always defense first, and now this year you have Harper and Bailey, and it completely flips the script. The 65 speed limit that we've known and loved in the past has just gone away. It's just most games now are just shootouts. Like look at Nebraska, 85-82. That game was back and forth in the second half. It was really just who's going to score more points. That is how you win the game, but who's going to ultimately, just score more in general. So Rutgers, formula for basketball has, changed the season completely with the 2 additions of Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, and it's really, it's just other players have been able to live up to the hype ultimately.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that does have to go into the recruiting process, and no knock on the guys that came here. They're solid players, but you look at Jordan Durkak, he's coming from Merrimack. You look at Martini, he's obviously coming from Princeton, which he was on that, Cinderella story, Sweet 16 run team. But outside of Harper and Bailey, it seems like there wasn't enough emphasis on creating an identity, and it was kind of, hey, we got a player here that can do this and here that can do that, but didn't really put into perspective, is this going to work well with our offensive system? And at least for me, it kind of begs the question of, was there an offensive system that they tried to build a team around? Or was it simply, hey, we have two of the three best prospects, in this recruiting class, and we're going to let them go to work? And right now, if that was the game plan, it's not working. I mean, these guys, obviously, Harper and Bailey are going to be one and done. This is going to be their lone season on the banks unless something goes completely wrong. And you start to wonder, are you ever going to have one single talent like this ever again at Rutgers, let alone two? I mean, it's taken how many years to get these two guys to come here and play together? What's the future hold if it didn't work out with two of the three best talents in college basketball right now?
Well, I think the second that, Harper announced his commitment to play at Rutgers, everyone was thinking, oh my gosh, men's basketball, this program's about to completely, turn a new corner, March Madness, maybe make a run, get, not obviously 5-star recruits every single season, but just start to build more of a name for this program nationally than just, in the Big Ten. Other good players want to come to Rutgers, and ultimately after you have Harper and Bailey, and maybe, the future of this program can get, it already was on an uprising, but, even just, this would have changed the trajectory completely. But the fact that Rutgers might not even make the March Madness tournament with Harper and Bailey is completely an ultimate failure.
Well, let's forget about NCAA. Let's forget about March Madness for a second, because that's got to be the furthest thing on the minds of Rutgers fans right now. Rutgers has to worry about getting into the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I know, definitely.
This year with the expanded Big Ten, obviously, it's the bottom three teams that won't make it to the tournament. And Rutgers right now is sitting at one of those bottom spots. Now, it's one thing to not make the NCAA tournament. Obviously, it was a disappointment. People had this team, in their minds, this was going to be the championship team.
Yeah.
But to go from the expectations of not only making the NCAA tournament, but making a run in the tournament, to where we're sitting at now with a 500 record with about a month left, I mean, it's very disappointing. I don't think anyone thought there would even be a question that Rutgers was going to make the Big Ten tournament. And I don't think people had a question they were going to make the NCAA tournament. And now it's completely gone out the window. I mean, barring Rutgers going on an insane run and winning the Big Ten tournament, I personally don't see a way in which this Rutgers team can make the tournament. There's just no way for the NCAA tournament, that is. Those two quad 3 losses, one to Princeton, one to Kennesaw State, that really has kind of been the killer this season, and the fact that Rutgers hasn't played well in quad 1 games.
Yeah, they're 1-8 in quad 1, Nick. So, everyone's looked at the schedule and said, okay, these are must-win games, but the problem is Rutgers hasn't won those must-win games. They lost to Penn State at Penn State. I should have won that game. They had to beat Wisconsin at home. They lost that game. And then, of course, like you already mentioned, the Kennesaw State and Princeton games were just ultimate failures. It's really disappointing because, when they went to Vegas, they beat Notre Dame in overtime, and then Alabama, Texas A&M, they battled them well. Those were good games. Rutgers actually out-rebounded Texas A&M. We're one of the best rebounding teams in the country. So we saw flashes of this Rutgers team in Vegas. Alabama, a 5-point loss, to Texas A&M, a 4-point loss. Two really good programs, and, despite being losses, people were saying, it's a loss, but they played pretty well. It's a decent result. And that just has not translated to Big Ten play. Rutgers is 3-6 and 15th out of 18th in the Big Ten standings. And, they really need to get the wins together just to get a chance to make the Big Ten tournament, like you said. And, yeah, this game against Northwestern on Wednesday is a huge game. Northwestern's 3-6 overall in Big Ten play, just like Rutgers. So, both teams are looking at this game as a get-right game. But, for Rutgers, if they don't have Harper 100%, it's going to be really, really tough to beat Northwestern.
Yeah, and overall record-wise, Rutgers is tied for the least amount of overall wins, not conference wins. They're 10-10 right now. Washington's the only other team that only has 10 wins, and Rutgers is now one of 5 teams that has 3 conference wins. So they're right on that bubble. It's a matter of losing maybe 2 or 3 more conference games, and you drop down to that bottom 3. And it's obviously there was some stories going into the season of who was going to be that true big man for Rutgers with Cliff leaving. Obviously, Agbole was supposed to be that big man to kind of center the offense around, but Now, with him out for the season, a lot of that falls onto Lathan Somerville, who, he's a big guy. He's got some skill around the rim, but he's still young. He's still kind of growing into this Big Ten starter role. And, I feel like it came a little bit easier for Ace and Dylan to get into Big Ten play and kind of be able to adjust well.
Yeah.
And Lathan Somerville is just not that caliber of player, which, don't get me wrong, I think give him 2 or 3 seasons here on the Banks and he has a solid career. But it's tough to get thrown into the fire the way that these guys have. And you're running out pretty much 3 freshmen every time out in what is essentially, I would say, probably one of the best, if not the best conferences in college basketball right now.
Well, 100%. I think, Rutgers in the portal, they got apparently the 3-point shooter they wanted, but they got 2 of them with Hayes and Martini. And then one position that was just left blank was the center. Cliff leaves. Oh, what's going to happen? Ogbole, Lathan, who's going to be the starter? And, of course, it was Ogbole. And he started to put it together towards the recent stretch, and he got hurt, and he's out for the season. So now it's all on Lathan. And like you said, there's flashes of his potential, but at times you see the freshman from him, cheap fouls, missing shots, turnovers, and that's going to happen to freshmen, obviously. Of course, Ace and Dylan, they're 5-star, they're NBA-level players already. It's kind of like they're like a different breed already. They're already miles ahead of the average freshman. But Lathan, like you said, give him a couple of years, I think he'll be good. But the fact that Rutgers didn't properly address, center in the transfer portal is hurting overall, because if you throw Cliff in this team, I think there's a fair chance that the team would be much better.
So that was my next question to you, because this is something that I have very strong opinions on, and I was saying this before Cliff even transferred. I said if he were to stay with Rutgers this season and he were to play with Ace and Dylan, I think he has arguably his best season as a college basketball player. And that is because last year, you look back on that season, it was a rough season. It was not pretty by any stretch of the imagination. Fans were pretty much checked out by this time last year. And a lot of that was because they didn't have a primary scorer or somebody they can look to for 15 to 20 points a night. And, as a guy who had been on the team for a while, who had been the name that most people knew and recognized, a lot of people looked for Cliff to be a 15 to 20 point scorer per night, and he's just simply not that. He needs a facilitator on the offense with him to get him going. And what better facilitator has Rutgers seen in the past, 10, 15 years than Dylan Harper?
Yeah.
I think that for Cliff, it would have been a lot easier to have a quiet, 15-point, 10-rebound night than what he had in previous seasons, because all the attention's on Ace and Dylan, and then you can quietly have a good season. Plus, you're playing with another exceptional, bigger player in Bailey, and you have a guy who can run the offense soundly, who can control the ball well in Dylan Harper. So I personally think that this would have been Cliff's best season if he would have stayed at Rutgers.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point to make. I think at the end of the day, when the money came talking to Cliff from Alabama, he was obviously going to go. But it really does, stink, because it really makes you think, what if that Cliff? And it just falls on Rutgers. They lost too many guys, and they didn't replace them properly. Not saying that Derek Simpson or, guys like that, or maybe Gavin Griffiths would have been outstanding this season. Not saying that. But look at Derek Simpson now, of course, succeeding St. Joe's. Maybe it's a lower program, whatever. But still, they just didn't properly address the holes they had in this team. And center is the biggest one. And then the guys that they brought in to be the 3-point shooters like Martini and PJ Hayes just haven't met expectations. And Jurkak has been so hot and cold. So it's, and then Tyson Acuff had that great game. Now it hasn't really. It has a great game against Wisconsin. It's kind of been back down to ground and whatever. Bryce Dortch has emerged as one of the bright spots of this team out of nowhere, kind of like Jay Will last year came out after not playing and just had a really good end to the season. Now we see Dylan Grant doing that. So there's some promise for next season with Dylan Grant. But we're not talking about next season. We're right now in the present. We know Harper is again not 100%. Ace Bailey's doing great things, but without both of them being 100%, this team is not going to win any games. That's facts.
With Harper, it's not even just his ability on the court. obviously he's a great shooter. He can finish around the rim. He's sound with the ball. But just his presence on the court, he is able to run the offense at whatever speed he wants. Every time I watch a game, I hear broadcasters talking about his ability to speed up the game without speeding himself up. Mm-hmm. He can go from 0 to 100 really fast, and he has such good control of his body and then obviously with the ball that there's multiple times where he could split, two defenders at the top of the key, get in for a layup, and he's so good around the rim. And when you have your two key defenders up the top focused in on the ball handler, it opens up other opportunities for the rest of your team, and that's where guys like Martini, guys like Acuff, guys like Durkak have shined this season, is when they have solid uncontested looks.
Yeah.
And without Harper, I just don't think you're going to get a whole lot of that, because it takes away the emphasis of, hey, we have to stop this guy. We don't want this guy to beat us. But yeah, Rutgers men's basketball, that is, does have a tough stretch ahead of them. Obviously, I think no matter how this season ends, it's going to be viewed as a disappointment. But
100%.
We'll move on now. We have Rutgers women's basketball, who had a little bit of a tough stretch of things, having lost quite a few Big Ten games in a row, but they take the trip out to Happy Valley, and they pull off the comeback victory. I was lucky enough to be out there covering that game here for the Daily Targum. And Matt, I was telling you, I was sitting there in the third quarter. Rutgers was down by 12, and I was just like, man, this is a tough loss. Just from the way that Rutgers had played this season, you see a 12-point deficit going into the fourth quarter, and you're like, yeah, you got to chalk this one up as another tough game. But they pulled it out. The defense really stepped up, holding Penn State to just 9 points in the fourth quarter. I mean, talk about stepping up when it matters the most. Rutgers outscored Penn State 25-9 in the final 10 minutes to come away with the 77-73 victory. And, of course, it was the duo of Adams and Kiyomi McMillan who absolutely stole the show late. Kiyomi McMillan hitting 2 late threes, one to cut the deficit to 3 and one to give her team a lead. And listen, for some of the rough games that she's had, you got to give credit where credit is due. Kiyomi McMillan has been nothing short of exceptional for the Rutgers women's basketball team.
Yeah, I mean, she has that one game scrolls at Michigan. Obviously not good look for her, but we still see she's an outstanding player. Her dribbles are like none other. She could, hit the 3 ball from anywhere on the court. It doesn't matter. Her confidence is, unmatched. She's a good shooter. Good, also, like another good facilitator too, of course. And yeah, Nick, you're completely right. I was keeping track of the score of the game while I was at the wrestling match we'll get into a little bit, and out of nowhere, I remember you texted me and I'm like, it's like 1 point, whatever you said, it's a close game, and I'm like, whoa, because the game basically seemed like it was over. Rutgers was trailing by a lot late in the game, and they had that crazy good comeback. And we've seen this before in the past where Rutgers has hung close with these Big Ten teams, like against Wisconsin, it was a close defeat. Against Nebraska, close defeat. Against Michigan State, close defeat. But they weren't able to actually, maybe complete the comeback or see the game out. But, to their credit, against Penn State, they did. And I think a big part of that, like you said, was, of course, Destiny Adams and McMillan. But, of course, Maya Petticourt and Lacey also getting in double-digit figures, which, you talked to Coach Cleese after the game. And she's been saying this, I would say probably recently, past couple of games during this losing streak, is that other players got to step up. And if other players can score, as well with McMillan and Adams having good games, this team can actually win games.
Yeah, and we'll hear from the head coach of the Rutgers women's basketball team, Coach Cleese Washington, in just a second. But that's one thing that has kind of been slow up until this point, but I think we're starting to see it, is JoJo Lacey's development with this team. Early on, she had a few good games, then got into Big Ten play, kind of got into a little bit of a lull, but she has been somebody that this Rutgers team can look to for, I would say, anywhere between like 10 and 15 points a game, and that's exactly what you needed, because Destiny Adams, Kiyomi McMillan kind of were the two bright spots of this offense. They were the people putting up the big numbers, and listen, you start playing Big Ten teams, they're going to key in on that. And, with Lacey being able to score, and kind of, you look at her, like I said, for like 10 to 15 points a night, if you can have one other player be in double figures, you're sitting pretty if you're Rutgers. I mean, that's all you can really ask for is 4 players in double digits. I mean, that's a great game.
Yeah.
And you also saw contributions from all over. Janae Walker got a little bit of an extended role in that game with 6 points and 8 rebounds. China Cornwell doing what she does best with 6 points and 9 rebounds. And it was just production from all over, and especially when it mattered late. I mean, like I said, McMillan and Adams, not the best start. They didn't start out great. It was kind of a little bit of a slop fest in the beginning, a lot of turnovers, a lot of just silly mistakes. Like, just we're trying to play too fast, got ahead of themselves, turned the ball over. But when it mattered most, the 2 leaders and the 2 stars of this team showed up, and then the supporting cast around them with players like Lacey, Maya Petticord, they did what they needed to do and ultimately came away with their first Big Ten victory.
Yeah, I mean, just something I actually noticed too, Nick, is now it's not really the biggest thing, but if you look at percentages, Lacey's a tiny bit better than McMillan from 3 now. It's 34.5% for Lacey, 34.2% for McMillan. But, I mean, hey, I think Rutgers, this team needed another 3-point shooter. Lisa Thompson Petticord, too inconsistent with the shooting from 3. But the last, well, UCLA game's a little bit of a difference for Lacey. But against Michigan, 6 of 11 from 3. And then against Penn State, 4 of 8. And, she's taking more threes, which you want to see. And she's putting more of them up, which is also what you want to see. And I think that's very, very key for this team. Is, of course, you have Adams down low. She'll always score like they're on the block. McMillan, she'll pull up from the free throw line. She'll pull up deep from 3. But if you can get Lacey on those open looks in the corner, like at least 8 times a game, she'll probably get at least half of them in, or at least 3 to 4 of them in the game. And then, McMillan getting a few. Just that gets you more points. And then, like you said, Petticord, if she can get going, this team has a recipe. Now, I wouldn't say for a crazy good success, but to at least get a few more wins, maybe 2 or 3 more the season, and try to make the Big Ten tournament. I think as long as you can make that tournament, that's at least, I would say a positive for this team after how they started in Big Ten play and how this team has been affected. Of course, they lost Antonia Bates to, after the season with the knee surgery. I think that's also a big loss. She's obviously not the scorer that this team needs, but she was very, very important defensively, whether it was blocks or steals. I don't remember which one it was specifically, but she was like 3rd in the Big Ten last year in one of those 2. So she was a very, very key player defensively for Rutgers, and now without her, they're giving up points a game, but they're also struggling to score points because, if it's just McMillan and Adams, no one else can step up. But this Penn State win, it's really, really positive for this team, especially since Penn State was coming off a win over against ranked Ohio State, number 9 Ohio State, Nick. So it was really good to, get your first Big Ten win against a team like Penn State who were in good form.
Well, not only that, but Rutgers snaps the losing streak. They kind of get going a little bit more. And the big thing here is Penn State, Rutgers, Northwestern, and Purdue. Bottom 4 teams right now, and Wisconsin we could throw in there, bottom 5 teams right now in the Big Ten as far as women's basketball goes. The difference between Wisconsin and Purdue, meaning the 5th worst team and the worst team, Purdue has no wins in conference play, Northwestern has none, but then Rutgers, Penn State, and Wisconsin are all tied at 1 win. So
wow.
At this point, it seems like it's going to come down to who can win 2, 3, maybe 4 conference games to fight it out for that last spot. And listen, it might not have been a pretty win. It might have been kind of ugly throughout. It doesn't matter how you win. As long as you have a win next to your name. And listen, Rutgers is better late than never. They avoid going winless in the month of January, pick up the first Big Ten victory, and I think they can build on that from here because they've seen more production from players like Lacey. Obviously, Adams has been great this season, just a double-double machine. She somehow was always around the ball, whether it's on offense or defense. Obviously, McMillan coming to Rutgers and doing what she has done, it's been exceptional. And the pieces seem to start falling into place for them. And to boot, the harder part of the schedule for Rutgers is done.
100%.
It was a gauntlet to start the season. You had, 4 or 5 games in a row going up against top 25 opponents. Yeah. Then you go up against the number 1 team in the country in UCLA at home. I mean, it wasn't easy, but like Coquise Washington says, we're in the Big Ten. This is, everyone says it, men's and women's basketball. Probably some of the best basketball in the country right now. And, you just got to keep taking it one step at a time. But a nice win for Rutgers women's basketball. Also a nice win for Coach Coquise Washington, as she used to coach Penn State. She was head coach there for 12 years for the women's basketball team. And I asked the head coach of Rutgers women's basketball, Coquise Washington, about that in the interview you'll hear right now. Big Heart of Daily Targum here with head coach of Rutgers women's basketball, Coquise Washington. Coach, first off, congrats on the win.
Thank you very much.
It was a gutsy win, down 12 going into the third quarter. What is it about this team that you were able to fight back from that and get away with your first conference victory?
Yeah, I think we made some adjustments at halftime, and they came out with definitely a higher sense of urgency. We started to press a little bit more, and we started to turn them over, and we were able to turn those, take those turnovers and turn them into points. And I think that was the difference of the game.
And, a little bit of a slow start for Kiyomi McGinley, Destiny Adams, but other players stepped up. JoJo Lacey, another great game. Maya Petticord had a great game as well. What does it mean to have other players that can score when maybe your best players aren't on?
Yeah, well, one of the things we've talked about in conference play is that we want to get more contributions across the board. We want to have a balanced offensive attack. So we've been working on it, talking about it, emphasizing it, and we're starting to see it bit by bit take shape. And so to see Maya come out there, to see JoJo continue to have the strong shooting that she's having. And then I thought off the bench, China, maybe she didn't get a ton of points, but the ones that she got, the offensive rebounds and putbacks were all big, and they were impactful.
And then Janae Walker also seeing some more minutes in this game, also against UCLA. How have you seen her grow and develop as a player over these first 20 or so games?
Yeah, I think certainly she's most confident on the defensive end, and with her size and her quickness. For her size, for her height, she's able to move and get up and down the floor and do some things and have a presence for us on the defensive end, and she's a good rebounder as well. So, we feel very confident in our forward rotation that we can play, China, Destiny, Janae, and we're going to get something out of it.
And then, obviously, going down the stretch, like I said, it was tough to come back, but your players that you always look to, they came up when it mattered most. How important is it to have leaders like Destiny and a player like Kiyomi to lead you in these tough games?
It's big. The one thing that Kiyomi does is she has a tremendous amount of confidence. And so the end of the game, when the moments are big, that's when she wants the ball. She wants those moments, and she made those 2 big threes down the stretch. She made the 2 free throws, and that was big for us. I mean, we don't come back and win the game without that. And one thing I'll say about Kiyomi is, when we recruited her, she said, "I want to come here and help us win games," and it's plays like that, at the end of the game where. She's making her imprint on this Rutgers women's basketball program.
And then, as a coach, how do you kind of keep her in the game after a little bit of a slow start to be able to shine in a moment like that?
It's not hard to keep her in the game because she's competitive. She wants to win. She understands that the game is long. It's 40 minutes. So just because the first 10 minutes didn't go my way, I got 30 more left. So it's not hard at all. It's just a matter of her finding her rhythm and reading the defense and seeing how people are playing, and she does a masterful job of that.
And obviously, you coached here for some time. Is there a little bit more behind the win that you beat your old school, or is it just happy to get the win?
It is not. I'm just happy to get the win. Whenever I come back here, and I come back here seemingly every year, it's fond memories. I always tell folks, like, my daughter was born here. My kids were raised here. I've got still a lot of friends and good memories here. So coming here, it's funny because I go in parts of, when I'm in the visitors' locker room, I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. Or, I'm on this side of the BJC, and I'm like, where am I? I know the other side very well, but I don't know this side too well. So it's always fond memories, and Penn State will always have a warm place in my heart.
Well, Coach, congrats on the win. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
And, and obviously just a lot of joy surrounding that win, getting the first conference win, kind of getting that feeling off of their back like, hey, we got to win one. And they did a great job of coming back, like I said, down 12 going into the fourth quarter, and that's all it is. Now it's just one game at a time. But another big win for Rutgers sports this weekend, Rutgers wrestling getting one of their first top 10 wins since 2019 against Illinois, right?
Yep,
yeah,
number 10 ranked Illinois, Nick.
So, Matt, you were there. I'll let you take this one away and tell us what it was like.
Yeah, Rutgers back-to-back basically. Friday, wrestling Penn State, number 1 team in the country, Nick. So you look at this game, of course, it's hard for me to put into words, Nick, but Penn State is just so good. They make teams that are pretty good look really bad. They're really good at that. The scoreline 35-3, it really doesn't reflect, Rutgers battled a lot of these matches close. Like, for example, it starts off with Dean Pearson with the upset win over Luke Lydale for Penn State, the true freshman. Then Schaffer battled close against Brandon Davis. And then after that, it kind of started to slip away. We saw Penn State dominate a lot of the bouts. They had 4 wins by bonus points. But overall, Rutgers, it's not a bad performance. It looks bad. It's a misleading scoreline, I'm telling you. Penn State just demolishes everybody they play, or wrestle, I should say. So
for those of you that don't understand wrestling, Penn State is like the Chiefs, pretty much.
Yeah,
they've
yeah.
been at the top of college wrestling for, what was it, man? 4 years now. They have been ranked at number 1.
Yeah, they're also on a 65 match win streak.
That's just ridiculous. I mean, somehow, some way, Penn State always finds a way to have some great wrestlers.
Yeah.
But we did have a pretty solid crowd at Jersey Mike's Arena, which is good to see, due in part to the very special guests that Rutgers Wrestling had. The Rizzler himself was there. They were giving out shirts that says Rutgers Wrestling gets a big boom.
Yep.
That must have been really cool. I know you had the pleasure of getting to meet the Rizzler. And yeah, I mean, what was that like, getting to meet an internet celebrity that's, 7 years old?
Yeah, it was very funny. I like how, of course, he was, like the focal point of the match. Not really focal point, but I like how he was incorporated into the match. They had all the wrestlers, say Rutgers also gets a big boom on video and everything, or like rank the Jersey Shore out of 5 on the boom meter, stuff like that. Yeah, Rizzler, nice kid. Went up to him. I just said, "What's up, man? Can I get a picture?" He didn't say a word to me. I just said, "What's up? Can I get a picture?" He instantly made the Riz face. He knows it's like on command.
That's his brand.
I said, "Thank you," and I walked away because the match was about to start. Literally, the wrestlers were running out of the locker room or whatever onto the mat, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta go back up to the press box." I was like, I was the last one to get a picture with him before the match started. So I was like, because I was debating if I should go down there or not. But anyway, yeah, I mean, Jersey Mike's was fired up for that Dean Peterson win. Then after that, Penn State kind of took over the crowd that was there, shouting stuff. They're very active on social media, I'll tell you that much. All my tweets from the match, a lot of Penn State fans talking smack about Dean Peterson's, how he reacted after beating that guy, Luke Lydale. I mean, they're saying, "Look, Dean, you're a senior, he's a true freshman, calm down." The Penn State fans, the wrestling fans at least, they're insane. But, yeah, whatever. That match, we knew it was going to be tough for Rutgers. They got 1 win. They were only projected to win maybe 1 or 2 bouts maximum, so it was from Peterson and Schaffer. So seeing Peterson continue his great season was really good to see. He was on, I believe, like a 13-match winning streak before he lost against Wisconsin's guy at 125. But also a Midlands winner, Dean Peterson is. But yeah, he's had a great season so far, a good resume for himself going to Big Tens. He just keeps adding to it. But going into the Illinois match, now, number 10 Illinois, we knew that this was the chance. If Rutgers wanted to get that top 2 win they've been searching for, this was the match. Illinois at home. We saw Rutgers wrestle Ohio State number 4 on the road. Really, really close. They lost. It went to the last bout, and Slavakusi unfortunately fell short. And we knew if Rutgers could wrestle like that against Illinois, they would come out on top. And yeah, of course, it starts off with the win from Peterson, and then it was really just back and forth, Nick. I'm telling you, Peterson won, Schaffer lost, Oliveri won, Clark lost. So we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now heading in to the last battle at heavyweight, Poznanski lost, so that made it Illinois up 15-12. So Rutgers needed to win at heavyweight, but they also were ahead on team points, 34-33. So as long as Slavakuski beat Luke Lufman at heavyweight, Rutgers would have had the victory. And I gotta tell you, that was an insane bout. The entire everyone in the building knew exactly what the stakes were. There's not a lot of neutrals there. These are diehard fans. They knew. You can feel the energy from the second the first whistle blew to start the first period of that bout. And it was 1-1, and when Slavakuski landed that takedown at the very, very end, oh man, it got so loud in there. And, Goodell jumping up and down, all the staff jumping up and down, all the wrestlers jumping up and down. And instantly, the music starts playing, the wind music, and it was insane. And Goodell gets drenched in Gatorade after. And yeah, it was a top 10 win. It was in sudden victory, so the second that he landed that bout, that landed that takedown, it ended the bout. And The crowd got hyped. Goodell was really, really happy. And in the press conference, the first thing he said was, the hardest thing for us to do was Saturday practice. You get beat by Penn State. You get a tough defeat. How do you respond to that against, going to Saturday practice? You got Illinois up on Sunday. And he said they were completely went back, strictly business, handle it like usual. No, down about the loss. They handled it like usual, and they got the top 10 win.
Yeah, and that's huge for Rutgers. I mean, you've seen them ranked for quite some time, and it's always been that top 10. It seems like all these major sports, Rutgers is in the Big Ten, and somehow, some way, the Big Ten just produces some of the best teams, and in this case, athletes. Because, obviously when you're in a conference with Ohio State, with Penn State, obviously even Illinois, and you're a wrestler, it's going to be tough. But yeah. Rutgers coming away with the big win. And I will say, I know there's a lot of people out there who might look at, collegiate wrestling and say, I don't know if it's for me. Give it a chance. If you are on the fence about wrestling, either go to a live event or watch it somehow, some way. Listen, I was never the biggest fan of wrestling like that, but I sat down about a week ago and listened to a Rutgers wrestling radio broadcast with our good friend Frankie Palumbo and Phil Giacomo. And I'll tell you what, one of the most exciting things I have ever watched. It wasn't a great match. Rutgers dominated. I believe it was Wisconsin.
Yeah, 31-7 win.
But just the action that was going on, the excitement from the fans, like you said, Matt, it's fun to watch, and it's very easy to pick up as a casual fan. I'm sure the intricacies of wrestling are a lot more difficult, but as a casual fan, you can watch a bout and be like, all right, I have a general sense of what's going on.
That's whatever. The announcers will say it. And yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. I mean, I wasn't the biggest wrestling guy before I had this beat 2 years ago. I was asked to go to Wrestling Media Day. I said, why not? Let's try it. And the team, I instantly was like, okay, I like this. This is a lot of fun because this team is just fun to cover. They got a great personality, really, really good people. Goodell's a great coach. And yeah, I remember on Media Day this season, he said something that I never heard him say before. He's like, we're tired of being number 15, number 14 in the country. We're tired of just having one guy be an All-American, one guy do this place here. He's like, we got to be the next step. He's like, I don't want to sound cocky. I don't want to sound like I'm upset where I'm at. I'm happy that this team is, always consistent. But he's like, we got to go above. He's like, we're having a chance to become maybe not one of the top 5 blue blood Big Ten team like Minnesota, Penn State, all them are. But we have to just get the next step. And beating number 10 Illinois, this was the next step he was talking about. And there's still more work to be done, of course. When you get to Big Ten championships and NCAAs, getting at least a few more guys on the podium, a few more guys get to the further step. Like last season, Dylan Chauver was a Big Ten champion. It was the first since 2019, which was when Siriano and Ashnault were the guys. So Rutgers hasn't seen guys like that since Siriano and Ashnault, and they were one of a kind. 2 national champions in the same day. That's kind of like Harper and Bailey for Rutgers. 2 guys that come to the school and they just completely take over. National champions, great stuff. But Goodell was saying you got to get the top 10. We got to get up there, and you beat Illinois. It's going to probably put Rutgers up pretty high in the rankings. They're 14 right now. Illinois is 10. I'd imagine Rutgers would probably take that 10th spot, somewhere around there. I don't know. But now they go on the road to wrestle. I keep saying play because we're talking about basketball. To wrestle Minnesota on Sunday. Minnesota ranked number 8 overall. Again, you look at this match, and if Rutgers could just wrestle how they did against Illinois and Ohio State, they could walk away with 2 back-to-back top 10 wins. It's going to be really tough, though. Minnesota has Gable Stevenson, which is a very well-known guy in the wrestling world, just WWE, everything he's known in. It's going to be tough at heavyweight for Slavikuski, but last season Rutgers wrestled Minnesota at Jersey Mike's, and they lost 2012. Again, another really, really close match overall. Rutgers won 4 of the 10 bouts, so it really went down to 1 or 2 other toss-up bouts. But that Rutgers need to win this number 10 Illinois match, and they did. And now they're set at 11-4 overall, and you would think, looking at the rest of the schedule, maybe you take a loss to Minnesota, but against Maryland, Michigan State, and Penn, they should win all 3 of those matches, and that would set the program up really, really nicely for the Big Ten tournament in Northwestern. And they have guys in the lineup that are doing good this season. Like I said, Dean Peterson, of course. Shaver coming off his Big Ten title last year. He has bigger goals this year. You got Oliveri back from redshirting this year. He's doing good at 141. And then there's some other spots that are still up and down, like 149, 165. But the lineup has finally taken shape. And, yeah, the guys are wrestling how they should. And it's just really this Minnesota match. They could win this game, Nick.
Yeah, and we shall see how the rest of the season goes for both wrestling, women's basketball, and men's basketball. We'll have you covered right here on the Rutgers Rundown podcast. Like I said, every Monday we will release a new episode both on the Daily Targum website and the Daily Targum YouTube at the Daily Targum. We plan on having some special guests coming in to talk some Rutgers sports with us, some familiar faces and voices you may know. And yeah, for now, Matt Mangam, Nick Hart signing off for episode 1 of the Rutgers Rundown podcast.